should double it up. Maybe we should have two two managers, players. And we're just like, actually, no, because these kids need to learn that they are not always going to win a trophy and they're not always going to get a prize.
Hello and welcome to Reflective Coach Podcast with Coach Luca. You can find the podcast on LinkedIn and Twitter, but mainly on YouTube and Spotify. So drop a listen, a follow and a subscribe. I'm lucky within this episode to have interviewed Amy Tomalin, who is a teacher, karate coach, football coach and parent. So it was great to get the insights, different perspectives and different hats within this interview and talk about having her own children, how she coaches them and the different relationships that she has between home and within coaching, karate and how she leads upon a session and how she engages with children and what she sees in the difference between children within education and then within sport. We talk around a lot of issues that exist within homes, parent relationships, what children's expectations are, some of the difficulties with some of our external stakeholders. But it was great to talk to Amy about how education plays its part as well as outside of school and the impact of sport. It was fantastic to talk to Amy about all these things, and it was great to have someone who has such a great background and such a wide knowledge. Amy isn't just a teacher, she actually has so much going on which interests her, and she is such a wonderful interviewee. So I suggest you drop a follow on Twitter for Amy, and I hope you enjoy this episode. It was great to speak to Amy, and I really enjoyed my time speaking to her. The Reflective Coach podcast is sponsored by Humble Gifts, and you can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can also listen on YouTube, Spotify, Podcast Addict and Anchor. So drop a subscribe, drop a like and drop a comment. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. I look forward to hearing from you all. This is Coach Luca, the Reflective Coach Podcast.
Good, you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's nice to see you.
You too?
A woman full of many talents, science teacher, send, karate, football coach, mother, partner. The list is endless.
Too busy.
But all in amazing things though, and everyone who has you in their lives is very lucky. So it's about being busy in all the right ways, and everyone else benefits from it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm more of a put other people before myself.
Of course, and obviously you have such a great background in terms of everything that you do, both teaching, grassroots, and obviously being a mother as well. But combining all that and getting into all those different areas can be so difficult in their own respects, because being a teacher can be so different from being a coach. And there's two different hats that you might have to put on, and although you can combine the skills, sometimes being two different people can be very difficult in its own sense, I suppose.
Yeah, like it is completely different, definitely. I'm definitely the strictest coach at football. Um, but I think that stems from karate more than anything. But yeah, sort of I feel like I'm in a lot more control when I'm teaching, like in a school, rather than sort of football training, because a bunch of 8 to 10 year olds running riot. It's literally carnage, to be honest. We have at least, I think we've got about 30 to 40 kids now every week training. So yeah, it's mental.
And it's about having that adaptability and obviously the skill set to be able to have 30 to 40 kids, because some coaches that I work with, you give them a group of 10 and suddenly their head is frazzled. But
Yeah.
I'm in a similar background where I work in a school day to day, and you put 30 kids in front of me, I'm not fazed by it. But you could put one of my assistant coaches and they're like, whoa, what are you doing?
Yeah, I must say I prefer bigger groups. I find you can do a lot more with them. Like the time almost goes faster, but in a positive way, not a negative way. Like if I turn up to karate and there's like 4 or 5 kids there, I'm like, what am I going to do tonight? Like this is not enough kids. I don't like it. And yeah, so I think because you can really get those skills across more, I think in a group session rather than, I'm not saying smaller groups aren't bad, they are good for certain things, but I think groups are better, and more of them the best as well. You just got to have that control, I guess, and obviously not everyone does.
Absolutely, and sometimes when you have 4 or 5 kids, it can really change your session plan. And I've often found myself watching time go slower. Not always, because
Yeah.
sometimes with 4 or 5 it can go so quickly. But then there are sometimes you're like, right, I'm running out of activities here. We need to engage. They're losing a bit of interest, and after when when you have an hour session with them and you've done 20, 25 minutes, you're like, this is a long half hour left to go here. Whereas when you're with a group, you're like, is that it? Only half hour
Yeah.
left? Can we add another half hour on?
Yeah, definitely. Like I know that the clock watching feeling, you're just like, oh, right, what do I do now? We've done that bit. That should have taken me a good chunk of time, but because there's only a few, it's done. And I know kids like repetition, they need repetition, but it's also you've got to get that repetition in without letting them get bored. Because as soon as you let them get bored, that's it. Carnage erupts.
Absolutely, and it's exactly the same in the classroom in that sense as well. And you take the same group of kids, say 30 kids, you sit them in the classroom, and then you take them out for an hour of sport. They're two different people.
Yeah, 100%. I was quite lucky as part of my teacher training. I got to spend 2 weeks with the PE department. Obviously that's what I wanted to do, but but not enough jobs, not enough money and training. So let's go for science. But yeah, it was like seeing kids I taught science to for the whole year and like really struggling to get engaged, and then suddenly put them on the astroturf or put them on the school field, and yeah, completely different person. And then also you got the opposite where you got the kids that are amazing in class, and then put them on a sports field. They're like, please just let me go in. Like they hate it.
Of course, and when you're such a person who engages with groups and is out on the grass, out on the astro, fun activities, constantly coaching, loves the energy, and obviously that's why you're in coaching and working with young people.
Yeah,
But they're so lucky because they have a teacher like you who can make lessons quite fun, quite active in that sense, and that's just an apprehension because I've never seen you teach. But you can be in such functional teaching lessons where even I've been in the support and I'm sat there, even I'm watching the clock. But when you get some energetic teachers, when P staff have covered lessons, they're like throwing a ball around. They're like, right, let's do this, let's do that, let's make
yeah.
learning come to life in that sense.
Yeah, and I think like I'm quite lucky. I have I trained in mainstream and I worked in mainstream for a while, but I always wanted to go to SEN, and this opportunity came up, so I thought, well, I've got to take it. So like my classes now, like I don't have more than 10 kids in a class, but for teaching that like teaching science, that's very different, and obviously they've all got SEN needs, so it's a completely different ball game. But yeah, being able to take like things, I'm like, right, let's go outside, like let's find something, anything practical, like even if we're doing plants, I'm like, right, let's go and look for a leaf, let's actually physically look at this leaf. And because I know that there are physical possibilities, they're going to learn more anyway rather than just sat behind a desk. And yeah, I do prefer the outdoor classroom as they call it. um, and we are quite lucky where I am. We have got like a woodland area, and it's actually got an outdoor classroom that's been fully designed. And I thought we'll come the summer months again, like straight out there, like walk 5 minute walk it is, and you could just do so much more. And yeah, just physical capabilities, just that they can engage more and they're more alert, which is better.
And it's about understanding the needs of those children and young people. Getting them outdoors and just being in that different environment, especially when summer's there, because you can be sat in a classroom and they're staring out at the sun like
Yeah,
that's where I want to be. And some kids might not even see the sun when they go and have summer holidays because different various backgrounds and
yeah,
when they have send needs, it's not always as easy to get out unless you have a carer at times, etc. And the variation of needs. But I worked at two different schools, and the one school that I worked at prior to this one, as soon as it come to summer, English was outside, maths were doing little things, and it was great to see them bringing teaching to life and utilising that outdoor space. But now I'm in this school, we have such an amazing array of space available to us. The
yeah,
only lessons that are outside are PE, and I'm like, English could go outside and sit under the
yeah.
rooftops that we got, or they could be out in the yard reenacting things. And I think I've had one lesson where French went outside, and I was like, we need more outdoor teaching to progress what we're doing with young people. We're so functional and set in our ways in education that it can be so difficult for kids to engage, and we can see that as both coaches and teachers in that sense.
And I think it's so easy for kids these days to just sit inside and play a computer game or watch telly or do technology is huge now, so the kids grow up with it. I remember coming home from school and like getting changed and going straight out with my mates to the park or something, like, whereas now it's, oh, I'm going on the Xbox, and it's like, but you're a kid, like go and play, like go be outdoors, don't just sit there talking to your mates virtually. Go and actually physically be with them. And I think that is quite sad, really, because I feel they're not as resilient these days. How easy it is as well. Like as soon as a bit of rain comes, especially with football, because obviously we train outdoors most of the year. It's like suddenly the numbers drop dramatically, and I don't know if that's the kids or the parents. It could be either, but it's just you've got to get them out there. I think a bit more and build that resilience, build those relationships, and actually how much outdoors has to offer, and mentally it's so much better for them.
Absolutely, and once they're outside in that space, and they are being children again, even when they are getting wet, and it's building that resilience. And I was quite lucky where I sat in my team at under sixes, and I took them through to under 12s. When it was heavy rain, the parents were like, "Are we really training in this?" And it was, well, yes, this is nothing's ever changed. We've always trained in
Yeah,
this. And as soon as I set the expectation with them, as soon as I started calling off certain sessions because of it was too much rain or too cold because the temperature was that low, they were like, "Why is training off?" So I was really lucky to have built that into them in that sense.
yeah,
But then I created too much a high expectation at times. But it
yeah,
worked out really well, and it was great that the kids were out there and they were resilient. And suddenly, when it came to match day and we were playing other teams and they couldn't cope with the rain, and I remember one team calling off the game 10 minutes in, and we were like, "What's happening here? We're happy to play for the hour in it."
yeah. Yeah, I think that is good. Sort of like we're obviously now the new rules have come in recently, haven't they? Where with football, if there's a thunderstorm, you have to like cease training immediately, which is fine. And obviously, we've had some really bad weather recently, and so it was like, right, training's on tonight. Wear appropriate clothing. If it starts to thunderstorm, we're all going in the changing room till your parents pick you up. And it's like actually good. Like get them out, get them muddy, because I take my son with me, and we take a bin bag, and he has to sit on a bin bag on the way home because I refuse to let it get all over my car. But it's just getting them there and keeping them active, because I think like I've always been that. Obviously from a sporty background, that's probably my background that's encouraged it. But I said to both of my boys, I said, you've all got to do one physical activity at least a week until you're old, like I'm talking teenage years at least. I said, if you don't like it, we'll try something new. That's fine. So, my eldest started with rugby, and he used to do rugby from the age of 2. And he loved it when he was younger, but then he got to about 5, 6 years old, wanted to try football because that's what his mates did, and that was it. I was like, right, okay, socially, you want to do football now. I think he's a better rugby player, but he's happier doing the social thing, and obviously we know that the social is important for kids as well. So, and they both swim every week. I'm waiting for my youngest to try and get him into something, but he goes to football training, and if I'm not coaching, the little one gets a ball and we're kicking it around the edge of the pitch, and it's just about keeping them active. And I think especially with PE in schools as well. There is not enough PE in schools, and we know that due to funding. So anything we can get them active outside, I think we just need to push it.
And it's getting them active and keeping them engaged, and as you say, social skills, because there's not enough resilience, there's not enough social skills within kids. And it's great that you've allowed your child to make its own choice, whereas you could have gone, no, we've spent this much time doing rugby, we spend this much on you're signing on fees, this on kit, you're staying with rugby, but allowing them to make that transfer across, and then they might go back and realize that they're a better rugby player. It's on their own terms, but sometimes allowing kids to do things on their own terms rather than,
Yeah,
parents firing it down their throat kinds of thing, can keep them engaged more longer because they're doing it on their terms and through their own
yeah.
energies, for example.
And that's what I say to parents, that when they bring kids along to cry, and the kid like cries throughout the whole first session, I'm like, look, don't bring them back, like unless they're ready and they actually want to come. I was like, please don't force them, because if you force them, you're gonna pretty much scar them for life, and they'll never do anything. I said, and I have had kids in the past that hated session one, never returned, and then about a year later they were like, oh, I want to do it again. And one of those kids, he's going for his black belt next year with me. So it just goes to show that actually, parents need to be pushy, but I think it's within reason, and still letting that child have the control a little bit, because it is what they're doing. And there's nothing worse. I think also as a coach, there's nothing worse having a child there that's being forced by the parent, because that kid isn't interested. That kid doesn't want to be there, and they make that clear to you. And then you're trying to be all like the happy coach and like, come on, let's do this, and they don't want to do it. So it's not worth pushing the child into something they don't want to do.
And it can really put you in a position then because you're like, I got this unhappy kid, the rest of the group are being affected by it, the parents expecting me to do this, the kid doesn't really want to be here. I feel really bad then because they don't want to be here.
Yeah,
And it just creates a whole context where it becomes really difficult. And sometimes you're like, right, if I'd like you as a parent to come across and be in my position, even for 10 minutes, and you go, do you know what? I got that wrong by even putting my kid on that pitch or forcing them to stay because it can be so difficult. And not enough parents understand the cycle of a coach and what they actually go through, both through their emotions and even when they got a session plan, how difficult it can be to execute that to how we want it in our own expectations and to achieve those objectives because of all the variations and scenarios that surround every session.
yeah, definitely, and I think it is about having those conversations with parents. I think in that case, because it's you try. Don't get me wrong, we all try. We want that kid to sort of turn around and think, actually, yeah, they want to be here, but and I think even though we go into coaching for the kids, you have got to deal with the parents. And I've touch wood and all that. I've been very lucky over the years. I've had lots of good parents on my side, but you do get the odd parent, and it's just like you've got to have that conversation, and make them realize actually this isn't for them, and it's not. I earn money from my karate instructing. I'm not going to lie, it's my own business, but I'd rather the kid be happy than me have that £25 a month or whatever it is they're paying me. I'm just like, they're not happy. Like, put your money somewhere else. Find another sport for them. And yeah, it's just not. If the kid's not happy, they're not going to get all those social, mental, physical, emotional well beings out of it. So don't keep going with it.
And it's about finding what could be the right sport for them. Just because it was our favorite sports. I'm speaking as a parent. I'm not a parent, but just because in a mindset of that, if it was my favorite sport and my child was there, I'd be like, right, you're doing football and football only.
Yeah,
If they said, do you know what, I want to be a dancer, then it's I'm not going to go. Well, I didn't do dancing, so you can't. I'd rather spend my own hard-earned money to put you through something you want to do than for
yeah,
you to be unhappy and then be out of pocket myself in that sense.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's right. We don't get me wrong. Some kids will follow their parents' dreams, and if the parents football mad, we have got some football mad parents, and their kids are football mad, and that's fine. That's almost like a learned behaviour. But yeah, it's my eldest did karate for a bit, and I was just like, he wanted to go, but I was just like, you can't do it. I was like, you haven't got the skill, mate. I'm just like, and I think that's hard. Coaching your own kids as well is a different ball game. Because they see you in a different light, and you've almost got to switch from parent to professional. And that's hard. That's why sort of if I am coaching this football team, I tend to coach the other team. Like I'll go and coach the other group, or if it's match day, I won't manage his team that's playing, just because actually he responds better to the other coaches than he does with me, which is good, I think, because we still then have that parent child relationship at home, and he doesn't see me as coach.
And it's those different hats, and understanding that as both parent and the coach is, really important. And you get to see that from a teaching perspective, parent perspective, coach. And I've been quite lucky where my dad was a coach. He took over the team when I was younger. But reflecting back, I was such hard work for him. I played up because I knew my dad was coaching, or I thought I could get my own way, and I wasn't one of the better players to even get my own way. And I took things out for him, and unfortunately, it didn't work out. But looking back, I wish that I had done things different and realised at a younger age, because I wish that he coached me younger. So I've been able to apply that own experience, and where I've been in the middle, and both my assistants are both parents, I've seen both their kids go through it, and I've been able to have honest conversations with their kids, honest conversations with them, and said, look, we need to make sure you're not coaching them in the session. So there's a rotation where I might coach the one coach's kid, the other coach has his son with the other coach, so they're not having those restrictions or issues as such, so they can have that difference between parent and coach. But
Yeah,
it's about supporting them, because it can be so difficult to make that adaptation, and it can be hard, because then suddenly a child can lose out of favour because they're like, oh well, dad's disciplined me in this session, or mum's disciplined me, and it's like, well, why did you tell me off? You're my dad. Well, no, you're playing up in coaching, or you weren't doing what the other coach says, and sometimes you have to pass that off to the other coach so that they can be the disciplinarian in that scenario.
yeah. And that's what we tend to do. Like all the coaches at our team, we've all got kids in the team. That's why we're the coaches. At the end of the day, we don't get paid for it. It's all voluntary, and the team wouldn't run without the volunteer parents. And it's like if there's if even if one of our kids is upset, like say a ball's hit him in the face or something, we actually don't go to our own kids now. We just sort of nod to one another. We're like, right, it's so and so today. You go to them, and because actually, if it is the parent that goes over, it blows it well out of the water. And I think that again, it's communication and just having those boundaries in place. And like you said, it helps that parent child relationship much more because then otherwise, if you've just been told off by your mum or dad as coach in the car on the way home, it's like mega awkward. You don't want that for your child.
And it's great to have that synergy and understanding what you don't want for that child, for them to understand as well in terms of their expectations in that session, and having coaches who support you and are aligned with your own understanding in terms of how you want to approach and what strategies works can really benefit you, as a lead coach or assistant coach, and when you deliver that session.
Yeah, and it is just about when we are coaching, we do have those regular meetings as well to keep everything and everyone's in the loop. Is always the WhatsApp chat's always going off, with strategies, and we are quite lucky. One of our coaches is quite highly FA qualified, so he tends to take the lead, and we're quite happy for him to do that. And he brings out his little whiteboard, and I'm just sat there like I've got a ball and some cones. That's all I need. Like that's my head. That's where my head's at. But yeah, then you learn from each other as well, and you're like, oh, actually, I can do that next session. I can lead on that. I can take that away from the group and do a small thing. And yeah, just keeping up with that communication and just working as a team, not against each other.
And it's that aligned communication which really helps and working alongside each other. And you all bring different skills. So, such as, again, as a teacher, you'll understand this, that importance of, being highly active within a session, and then that, visualization of learning through a whiteboard, which can really help benefit every one
Yeah,
of those players when they're in that session. So, even if they're with you one week and then they were with the other coach, it complements their learning in both ways. And some coaches, especially volunteer parents, because they might not be teachers, they might not be coaches, they can have a variation of backgrounds, might always understand that there is a big difference in standing there and listening or doing something actively, or visual learning. So when you combine that, and even though you all have different skill sets in how you like to deliver, they all actually complement each other really well.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that's what helps a team grow as well because word gets out that actually it's a good team. The sessions are enjoyable, and that's because it is always different most of the time. Or no matter though, all the kids will always say to us, "Can we play a match yet? Can we play a match yet?" And we're like, "Well, no, it's training. Like we're not playing match tonight. We're doing skill work." But yeah, having those different backgrounds, I think, is good. And I know when I first started, they were like, "Oh, you're the strict coach," and I was like, "But that's just me. Like that's the natural. Like karate is a strict sport. Like it's very disciplined. Like if you can't stand still, you're in big trouble, sort of thing." And I sort of come in, and that was like quite hard for me coming into football coaching because the coaches weren't very strict. But then it was like the kids would sort of be, they'd be trying to introduce an activity or something, and the kids would just be like kicking a ball around or playing tag in the back, and it was just like stop, like you got to listen. And I think they liked that. The other coaches liked me coming in with that, but then I was like, well, I'm the only one doing it, so this is we need to we all need to have that discipline. We all need to work together on that because otherwise I'm going to look like the big bad wolf, and they're not going to want to come and do sessions with me.
And it's great that you've been able to rub off not only on the other coaches, but create a more higher end environment for those kids. So even though we talk about high performance in that sense, sometimes you can't relate that to grassroots football and kids. But when you change it to high standards in a sense where you're maximising every minute and they're learning, they're being coached, they're actually getting more contact time, they're actually getting more game time, which is exactly what they want, rather than playing tag or doing karate chops to each other at the back or whatever it is they're doing. Um, as I said, I was quite lucky to have my group from under sixes, so they were quite disciplined in what I expected
Mm.
from them. So when they started coming into sessions, I could just liaise with my assistant coaches, and they knew exactly what they were doing because of the standard set. And then sometimes I go and observe other sessions, and they're blasting balls, and there's cones not in the same color, or cones are everywhere else, and my head is spinning.
Yeah,
And then suddenly they've asked me to take a session, and then they've said, "Why are you sorting out the cones? And why are your bibs all organised? Are you OCD?" I was like, "No, they're just basic concepts to organise a session." And teachers are quite frankly heavily criticized in some sense because they're too organized, and some people say that you're too OCD because of your classroom and where you have things, but it's just organization. If you can go and grab a ball or grab a bib or grab a cone, suddenly your session and your lesson flows through so
yeah.
well because of the way you got little things set out here and there, for example.
Yeah, someone actually said to me at work the other day, they went, "God, this room looks so much bigger." I was like, "No, it's just tidy. Like it's tidy and it's organized." Because I am so busy that everyone's like, "Oh, you're so organized." I'm like, I have to be. If I'm not organized, my life would literally fall to pieces. It wouldn't just be me that falls; it'd be everything else. And I've spent the weekend in IKEA buying more storage stuff for my classroom because everything has to be in a place. Like I've got a pile of something, I'm like, I need a box for that, I need a file for that. And it just if my brain's organized, like I feel like everything else just slots into place.
And sometimes I've been into some really organised teachers' rooms, and I'm like, "Whoa, it's so organised in here. You've got everything. It's clean. You even got air fresheners in here." Then other teachers' classrooms, I'm seeing piles of paper. I'm seeing
Yep.
uh, tables pushed to sides, and they're just walking in, and I'm like, "My head's gone already. I can't wait for this lesson
Yeah.
to end."
Yeah, definitely. And it is just, throughout COVID, we did the whole kids stay in the classroom and teachers move around the school. So you didn't have your own classroom. And I literally hated every second of that. So to be able to get my own classroom back and make it my own, it was just like, right, this is, and I'm like really funny. I'm like, right, no one's touching my whiteboard pens. I'll look them away in a drawer if I have to. And then people go, oh, can I borrow your room for a lesson? I'm like, it's got to stay this tidy. Like this is how you found it. This is how you leave it. Because I don't let any of my students leave if they've made a mess. Like they have to tidy it up.
And I'm studying to be a teacher, but already from all the experience I have working in schools and being in and out of lessons and seeing all the different teachers, I'm already thinking of how I'm going to have my classroom and that. Little things like that, like whiteboard pens. Like when I see whiteboard pens being handed back in with no lids and stuff, it
Yeah.
freaks me out because I'm like the waste of a pen. But then I'm
I
like,
count them in and count them out. I won't. I actually like. I'm like right. I've given out 10 pens, and I'm have no one's leaving until I've got 10 back. Like the kids like think I'm like some army sergeant. I'm like no. Like they need to all come back.
and it's little things which you're embedding them because it's like, all right, Miss expects this back exactly like that, and then suddenly, you know, if you borrowed one of their phones and then it came back with a massive crack in it, it's the exact same with a pen without a lid. You haven't respected that in the way
Yeah.
it's been given out to you, and you're not happy with that. The same, I won't be happy with just this whiteboard pen. But
Yeah.
suddenly they're going to go, right, I've got that respect, and at the end of the day, a lot of teachers are spending their own money to go out and buy a lot of these things, and then I'm like, well, this teacher's actually spent money on this, and you can have the most respect just put that little plastic lid back on to give it
Yeah.
how you received it. And it's that self-respect, discipline, resilience, some of these key things which kids are lacking so much of, and yet there is an effect from COVID as such. But I think
Yeah.
in just general day to day, when you see it around them, we've lost a lot of these core values and standards, even though we try to instill them. But it has to be done collectively, and that's the importance of doing it within sport as well as sport within itself.
Yeah, and I think I like you said, COVID has a lot to play. But it shouldn't have made kids lazy, and that's what I feel like kids have become. And I think that does come back to the technology. During COVID, I taught online, I taught virtually, and for me, I went mad. I went absolutely bonkers. Everyone was like, "Oh, it must be lovely working from home." I'm like, "No, it's horrible. I don't leave the house." Like my kids got picked up in the morning and taken to school for me. I'd sit at the computer all day. Don't get me wrong, it was like nice to be able to get bits of washing and stuff done in between lessons. But then the kids would get home at the end of the day and they'd be like, right, dinner. sort out the end of day stuff, sort out the next day stuff, and then, oh, okay, it's the evening now. We're just going to sit and watch telly. Like, not being able to leave the house just destroyed me mentally. And it was amazing that actually how much leaving the house and getting out and being somewhere different it just changed my whole mindset. The old school I used to work at, like you, before I went into teaching, I worked in schools for about 5 6 years. So I managed to build up those relationships and those core qualities. And we had a really big site, so I would be, even though I didn't realise, I was so active at work, just walking around the school, going to see students, and picking up students when there was problems, and then not be able to suddenly go from that to, oh, that's it, you're at home. It was like, oh, okay, like what do I do? Like it was just so strange. And I think that was obviously why kids these days are not as interested in going out to the park and things like that. We all grew up. We all went with teenagers down the park on a Friday evening when, and you go to our local park now, and you don't see teenagers down the park, and it was like, what's happened? And yeah, technology is a massive thing to play, and obviously COVID as well. And I think it's almost encouraged people to stay at home, and we just need to try and work that back.
Absolutely, and it's about participation. And obviously, when you have a group of 30, 40 kids, each of their wants is very different. So you might have the really competitive kids who want to aspire to be the next Premier League footballer. You've got the kids who are happy to just be at training and be there for friends. You've got the kids who do a bit of football, bit of tennis, bit of this and that.
Yeah,
And then you've got the kids who go, do you know what? If I stopped playing, it wouldn't bother me that much. But it's, sometimes just having them there in those participation levels, and you say, right, I might put on an extra session next week, or we might go and do a gym session, or we got someone coming in. Just having that extra hour of engagement per week can certainly add up
yeah.
and make that big difference to them, and it's really important to have that.
And yeah, and that's like part of what I do with karate with my so my kids training for their black belt. um I train twice a week with karate, and so, even some of those kids, they only come once a week. So I go, right, okay, you're what you have to do now, between like, it's like the year leading up to their black belt, they have to do a lot of fitness training, because the black belt grading is physically tough. And so I said, but I can't do that all in my lessons. Like, I haven't got the time in my lessons to be able to do all that all the time. So it's like, right, okay, you need to now think, what you're going to do outside of karate to enhance your fitness. And they have to create a diary. And I said, it's just like a running log. It's not, it can be a piece of scrap paper. I said, it hasn't got to be anything fancy. You just got to put the date and what you've done. And suddenly these kids are actually realizing how physical they actually are. They're like, oh, I did an hour and a half of football at school today. Oh, I've been in an athletics competition. I've been running track, and it's like, actually, you are being physical, but you're just not realizing. And then when they start to log it, they're realizing how much they do, or you've got the opposite of how little they do. And then we will do fitness drills. So like my Monday night classes at the moment are, for like my black belts, they are half fitness, half skill based. And I actually join in with the fitness with them, because I think, actually, rather than me just shouting at them what exercise they're doing, if they physically see me working hard, then it might make them work a little bit harder. And you can see the ones that aren't doing the physicalness outside of karate, because they're just like, I'm done. Like, after 3 minutes of exercise, they're like, oh, I'm so tired. And then you've got the others that are just like, I'm going for it, I'm going for it. And it is great to see, but then it's actually trying to find, right, what can I do for that one that's struggling? Because I don't have enough time in that session. I need you to do it outside. And yeah, it's hard. But yeah, what more can you do other than in that session?
And it's great that you support them so that they can take ownership of their own, approach to fitness and how they're engaging, or how much or whether it's less. And I've had a kid like that. He was doing taekwondo on a Wednesday when we trained, and then he would be able to train on a Saturday and then play a game on a Sunday, which is completely understandable. At least he's still doing sport. He's engaged in something else, which I'm happy with. He's missing out for a legitimate reason. It's not just because he can't be asked to be there on a Wednesday after school. And I was quite happy for that. But then it came a sense of where he wasn't having that extra session, but all the other players were. You could see the big difference in then the technical ability, which was grown because they're training for an extra 4 hours over a monthly period, and that can add up collectively over a 6 month period. And then when you look at the correlation of technical ability, and this player is wondering why he's so far behind, and is a goalkeeper, but then wants to come outfield. But we got to look at when we can suit the outfield play to the rest of the players so that it doesn't become detrimental. But we're trying to increase participation. It became quite
Yeah.
difficult in that sense. But then there came an open conversation. Look, this is why, and then he fully started to understand. And sometimes having those conversations with players, especially from a young age, is really important.
And yeah, and I think you just have to embed it, don't you? Like you can't. It's like I know for a fact with my kids at karate, we have lots of kids that train twice a week, and it's no issue. And I have some kids that only train once a week, and I'm like, you need to really train twice a week now. Like you're approaching black belt. You're missing out on a lot because I can't always cover like what I've covered on a Monday. I can't then cover again on a Wednesday because it's not fair for those that train twice a week because they're getting the same stuff and it almost could bore them. But it's also you got to think actually why can't you train twice a week? What is it behind the scenes? Like is it another club? That's fine, fair enough. Or is it actually is there things at home that means you can only come once a week and it's difficult for you to get there? And then it's having those you don't want to make them feel left out and you don't want to make them feel guilty and bad for not training twice a week. And yeah, but it's also like, right, okay, yeah, actually, you're going to have to put that little bit more practice in at home because we're going to redo this next week, but you're not here and you need to be ready for the following week. And which, again, is as they get older, I think they understand why. But when they're younger, they're just like, oh, yeah, I want to do it because I like it. And it's just having those balances, I think, which can be difficult and it's completely different per child, I think.
Of course, and it's understanding each child, and not trying to make them feel guilty or anything like that. But it's just natural standards which we want to try and engage with them and have those
Yeah.
honest conversations. And I remember once I was away for one coaching session, and my assistant coach said, "Right, I'll take the session. I'll come pick the equipment up off you. I'm happy to come pick it up from you at school. What time will you be in?" And I said, "I'll be in at 7:30 a.m. in the morning." And he was like, "No, you're lying to me." I was like, "No, I'm in at 7:30 every morning." He came and picked up the equipment then at 7:30, and then he was like, "I can't believe teachers are in at 7:30." I was like, "Mate, how do you think we get everything done?" And he was like, he was bewildered by it. But it's that little
Yeah.
sense of, what people don't understand about each other, and how much commitment goes into things, and even sessions like that. And I understand, one of my players, which is the same player who had Taekwondo, always, always, always late, no matter where we were, whether we were close to home, away from home, um, training, game, no matter what, always, always late. And it got to me after a while. It started to really frustrate me. I was like, right, you've got no younger siblings. You have two cars. Both parents can drive. One parent runs their own business, so everything's on their own time scale. One works from home, so is always adaptable and says he can do things. Happy to always see me when he needed to see me. But always late the training. And I had a conversation. I said, "Why are you always late?" And he said, "Well, we just can't get here." I was like, "But it's 9:30 in the morning. I've been here since 8:15." I was like, "If I can get here an hour and 15 early, I certainly believe you can give that extra 10 minutes every week." And it wasn't trying to make him feel guilty. It was just trying to have that honest conversation where
Yeah.
we could change those standards and principles within him. So he had better timekeeping. He could turn up, and he knew what the expectation was.
Yeah, and I think like I instill that in the karate kids. Like, so they'll turn up some nights they're like, "Oh, I've forgotten my belt," and I'm like, and I go, "Oh, so where is it?" They were like, "Oh, it's in my bedroom. My mum forgot to put it in my bag," and I was like, "Hold on, whose belt is it?" Like, and they're like, "Oh, it's mine." I'm like, "So whose responsibility is it?" Like, you have to come to karate with your gi and your belt. Like, you wouldn't leave the house without your pants on, and you can do that yourself. So it's like actually, and they sort of like, look at me the first time. They're like, "What?" Like, 10 and a 4 or 5 year old. It's your responsibility. But actually, yeah, it is about making them responsible for their actions, but you're also encouraging that independence a bit as well. And it is nice that I've heard so many lovely feedback stories from my parents, like, oh, they're so much more engaged in school now. They're more focused in starting karate and things like that, and that is lovely. And I think that is like we follow very strict sort of can't even think of the word now, but like we have these boundaries in place at karate, and we're very disciplined. We're very respectful and things like that. And I think we're quite old fashioned, I guess, in a way that actually it's when you're handing that responsibility over to that child, they will take it. And I think sometimes parents don't give their child enough responsibility, which it should. We all had. I know I had to do chores growing up. Um, my 9-year-old, he's like, "Can I have some? Can I earn some money?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can do chores. Like you do your chores, and I will give you some money." But without those chores, I'm not just giving you money because nothing's ever just given to you, sadly.
And we've seen a big change. Parents working from home more often, and where I'm in school, and suddenly kids are ringing up. Oh, I forgot my kit, and suddenly their parent has dropped it in. I was
Yeah,
speaking to a kid Friday. I was like, if I forgot my kit, I forgot my kit. I missed the after school session, or I got bollocked by the teacher, and I
yeah,
learned from both those lessons, and it became my responsibility. But even kids like that, they're not even taking on their own responsibility, getting kit or washing their boots or anything like that.
yeah,
And my assistant coach, his kid's only 11, but he's like, he goes home, he cleans his boots, and if his boots are dirty in the next session I see him, he's in trouble. And I
yeah,
love that because, it's that responsibility and discipline which works hand in hand. Whereas I know another parent and their kid is literally everything is spoon fed to them, from their bag being packed for their boots are cleaned by their parent. They do nothing. They don't care about what time they leave. They don't care if they're late. And that really, you can see the difference in the two kids. And I talk to this one parent about high performance and achievers, and they're aspiring to try and be a professional footballer, and they're trying to push for the academy. I was like, okay, so you've been in the academy system for 5 years now. Not once have you actually got any academy team. Can you maybe see the reasons why?
yeah,
And it's that self discipline because the academy kids, I will tell you, are a different virtue. They got boots with their own initials stenciled into them. So they're cleaning their own boots. They're not just having, boots and not caring about them or anything. But those little standards is the difference between maybe why your kid is or isn't in that academy team.
yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, and that's the thing. When you do have those kids that everything is done for them, they will struggle to accept sort of even criticism sometimes, I think. Um, and yeah, it just needs to it does need to change. Like I feel the world has gone soft. um, I think we all talk about that. We're all in strange times where I get confused very easily, especially being a teacher. I think we come across it a lot more than standard adults. But yeah, I've done it before. I was dropping my kid off at school one day and I happened to be at home. I think I was on different half terms because I don't work local to home. And I was dropping him off one morning. We were walking across the road and I was like, where's your bag? Where's your bag and your water bottle? Oh, I've left it by the front door. I was like, well, what are you going to do today then? Like, I don't know, I don't know. And I was like, well, I'm not going home. I'm not bringing it back. Like, because it's not, that's like a half an hour journey for me there and back. And I said, I've got stuff to do. I said, you're just going to have to tell your teacher that you've forgotten your book. You're like, because they have like book bags, don't they, in primary school? And I said, you're going to have to tell your teacher. You're going to have to take that responsibility. So I dropped him off the door and left. I was like, no support there. I was like, you could deal with that on your own. And I did. To be fair, I did come out of school. He came out of school the other day, and I was like, "So, what did your teacher say?" Oh, she didn't mind, and I had a cup for water, so I was all right. And I was like, "Damn, like parent fail almost a little bit there. Like you didn't really learn your lesson."
I love that though because it's that sense of understanding in terms of what we may have gone through. I know that I worked with my best mate. We're both the same age. We went to the same primary school, same secondary. We both played for the same football team, and then we've ended up doing the exact same job at the same time. But when we've gone into certain lessons, such as a games lesson, we see the cohort of teachers that, although they're still very good teachers, it isn't the same kind of concept of discipline or the standards that we went through. And we see the games lessons, we used to go in and we used to be so fearful if we forgot our kit, or if we weren't sat on the wall, or if we didn't have certain, didn't have our rugby tops on or anything like that. And the standards were set, and suddenly,
Yeah,
we'd have a rollicking, or we'd have to do 10 press ups, where it is none of that. And we're like, this is why kids are in different tracksuits all the time because they just don't care, or girls are trying to push it with the leggings. And I'm like,
yeah,
there is a big contrast in this. And, um, you know, and I was speaking to someone else, and although it's not about having shouting matches with kids anymore in schools, and it's more restorative justice, there is a
Yeah,
big difference in having restorative justice and then going, well, these are standards. We need to maintain these
yeah.
values.
And I've had that. We've had to develop our curriculum this year, and we've started doing relationships and sex education. And I had a kid I was teaching, it was a year 10 group, and I had a kid that he was totally out of line towards someone else in the class. And I was like, out. I was like, you're not staying in here, get out. But what, I've done nothing wrong. I was like, no, you've just targeted someone. I said at the start of the lesson, we're all entitled to our opinions. We have to all respect each other's opinions. We're all going to agree on different things. We're going to disagree on different things. And that's okay to have that debate, but it has to be respectful. I was like, you are out of line. But then, yeah, I had to go back and I had to have that restorative justice with him. And I had to say, like, what you said was wrong. You can't target someone like that. I said, if you'd said your point without targeting at someone, I said that would have been absolutely fine because that's your opinion, and we could have led with that, and we could have had a really good class discussion. But the fact that you targeted someone, oh, but they're just soft. They should have just found it funny. I'm like, no. I said, even if they did find it funny, what you did was still wrong. And yeah, like we're a big restorative justice school now, and my old school was, if we set a detention, we had to go down and see that kid and be like, why are you in detention? Like, what's going to happen? What's going to change next time? And there was a point, if you excluded the kid from your lessons, that kid wasn't allowed back in until you had that restorative justice and plans had been put in place. But yeah, like that's what I love about karate, I think, because I can get away with, like, oh, you've just been really naughty, like you've just been really rude, down 10 press ups, and I'm allowed, I've got these big blocking sticks, and I strike the kids with, not in a horrible way, like not beating them up, but it's almost like I'm allowed to do that. And I think sometimes, actually, no, you've just yawned in my lesson, 10 burpees, like, whereas you go to your PE lesson, and yeah, like you said about the whole kit thing, the old school I worked at, they actually altered their PE kit, like, expectations, because so many kids were turning up in the wrong jogging bottoms. So they said, oh, okay, as long as they're navy, you can wear whichever jogging bottoms you like. And I was like, well, why have you changed that? Because the school jogging bottoms are a lot cheaper than your Nike pair that you get from JD Sports. So if they can afford a Nike pair, they can afford the school pair. And it is just, the school dropped their expectations. So teachers almost had to drop their expectations as well. And it was quite sad to see, really.
And it's all those things, it's, if we can instill little things into those sessions, and especially in sport, drop and give me 10. I remember, having a kid who was quite disruptive, and luckily, when my background in teaching and ALM was supportive of understanding that he hasn't maybe been diagnosed for ADHD, but I could see all the signs there for ADHD and all the reasons why. So, restorative justice did work, but then there were times where he literally had to be disciplined, 1, 2, and you're out, and it created a routine for him where that expectation was really high, and he had to come in with
Yeah.
great behaviour. And sometimes we're understanding of it, but sometimes the behaviours were extensive so much that they disrupted and caused so much issues within the session, and suddenly parents are questioning, and then it created a magnitude of problems. We had to have that discipline which worked both ways, and then restorative justice then follow from that. But that discipline in sport is so essential, and it's about maintaining those standards. And I know Gary Neville and Roy Keane always speak about high standards, high standards, high standards. And it's even though when you had new players coming in, regardless who they were, they had to correspond with what the principles of the club were and the expectations were set in that environment and dressing room. And that's maybe what the problem is with a club that they speak about, where no one is there championing that anymore. And that's because so much is changing, and we're giving so much power to young people. And as much as it's great that we're empowering them and we're giving them more voices and we're adhering to their needs and wants even more, we forget that this is an adult-led world, not a child-led world. And there's
Yeah.
certain reasons why this is an adult-led world and not a child-led world.
Yeah, and it's like when a kid shouts at you, just like, who's the adult in this situation? Like, who told you it's okay to shout at an adult? And yeah, it is just crazy, I think. We're very, although we want to have that discipline in football, we're all about treating that respect as well. If one of our kids takes someone out, purpose or accidentally, we've always encouraged the kid, right, you go and see them, and you make sure they get up, and you make sure they're all right. Like, they might be the opposition, but we're still going to have that respect for each other. And we were quite lucky. We had one of Reading Football Club's players come down to our training one day, and I'm chattering away with him because I do all like the fundraising. He's involved in all that, and I was chattering away about how he found his way into football and how he got into Reading FC, etc. And he was just like, he just looked at me. He was like, "Can I just come play football?" And I was just like, "Okay." It was just like, I'm trying to gain some information here for my report and my write up, but yeah, go and play football. It's fine. And that was brilliant. Like seeing the kids play with a professional footballer, and a couple of the kids even like managed to get the ball off him. Obviously, it was probably a little bit enhanced, but they were just absolutely like the thrill and how excited they were. They had no idea who this guy was. All we did was like, oh, we've got a Reading football player coming to training tonight, and they were just like, oh wow, it's so cool. They hadn't got a clue. Like there was a couple of kids that followed the team, so they understood. But they just thought, I'm playing football with a professional, and their confidence just grew so much. It was amazing to see.
And it's great when kids, grow in that confidence, and it's really important that they do, because so many kids are lacking even confidence, self-esteem, social skills, as we've mentioned. But when you're certainly empowering them, it's that case of making sure that they don't have too much confidence and they're not overconfident. And sometimes that can turn onto the pitch, or maybe in a karate, going into a fight or whatever it is. Suddenly,
Yeah.
I'm going to beat this kid, or I'm going to win this. And sometimes it's like, whoa, don't overestimate or
Mm.
underestimate in this sense. Go in level headed and provide and do everything that you can do and see what the result is.
And that's what I tend to do with like my black belts now, because they think, oh, I'm black belt, I know it all, and I'm like, yeah, but you don't. Even I don't know everything, and I've done karate for like 20 odd years, and it's like, so what I try to do now is I go, right, what did you do wrong? And they look at me and they're like, well, I did nothing wrong. And I'm like, no, 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 you definitely did something wrong, but what was it? Because rather than me going, oh, you didn't punch hard enough, oh, you did the wrong block, oh, you didn't sink your knee low enough, I'm now like going, right, you think about what you did was wrong, because I have got a few kids that do think they are like, oh, I'm the best and I don't do anything wrong. And it's finding ways to knock them down without hurting their feelings, because we know kids get hurt their feelings very easily now. And I don't want to upset them, but actually I'm like, no, you're not the best, and you're not actually perfect, and you've got to learn that you are making mistakes, and you've got to realize you're making those mistakes, because obviously me telling you what those mistakes are isn't working, so let's try it the other way. Or I just get the other kids to pick on them. I go, right, watch him, tell me what he's doing wrong, and they're just like, he's not bending his knee, he's not punching, and they rip him to like, they'll rip each other to shreds, and I'm like, kids, like, chill out, like, take it easy. Even I'm not that harsh, but I think it's honestly as well. Like kids do struggle to lie, especially when they're given an opportunity to be bashful.
And sometimes receiving feedback from your peers and then them being so harsh can really benefit your own learning, and how you take things on board. And if you can create a healthy environment where you can combine all of that, and they're able to receive those criticism quite openly, especially from their peers, they can receive it in a good context where it can benefit them to grow, and certainly appear, because sometimes you give feedback to kids and suddenly they can't take it on board, whereas they need to be able to, especially in those sporting environments when there is going to be heartbreak because of results or outcomes or anything like that in that sense.
And yeah, and we were discussing this sort of a few months ago now when we're doing our end of season awards. Ours is like a bit weird. We don't do it at the end of season. We do it actually at the start of the new season. But we sort out the awards really early on, and we've got a big team now. So when we used to give out 4 awards every season. It didn't look so bad that 10 kids didn't get an award. But whereas now we're like, oh, maybe we should double it up. Maybe we should have two players, two managers players. And we're just like, actually, no, because these kids need to learn that they are not always going to win a trophy, and they're not always going to get a prize. And there's not always like, because my son will come home from school, he's like, oh, if I read this book, I get house points. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, but you need to find that time to read then. Like I'm not gonna sit, I haven't always got all the time in the world, sadly, to sit every single night and listen to you read. So if you want to read, crack on. But it's almost like everything is rewarded. And so when we decided with these end of season rewards, we were like, actually, let's just give out one player, one manager's player, one most improved, etc. I said, because those kids have got to learn that it's not always going to be them, and they need to take that fallback sometimes.
Absolutely, and it's that importance, and making sure that isn't doubling up because even when they go into a job, it's not okay. You hit your target this month. You might get a bonus because of your job, and then in other jobs you might go there and there is no bonus, there is no outcome. It is you have met your expectation. What's the next one, and work on towards it. Teachers don't get extra pay if they get more kids who pass test results or higher
No.
results. It's the same outcome no matter what.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think teachers have got it easy, and like we really haven't, if I'm honest. I'm quite lucky now. Like my old job was very different. It was very difficult. I worked very long hours, and I had a lot more kids. Whereas in my place now, I am quite lucky. I get to work at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning. I stay late 2 nights a week, and that's only because my karate is round the corner, so it benefits me. And the other days, if I can get out at 3:30, I'm out. But yeah, it is like I was like all my year 11s passed their science GCSEs. I was like amazing. I just get that little bit of satisfaction. Like that's my reward. There is nothing there, and we're lot with SEN. I find I've started taking a few PE lessons this year, which I'm like hella excited about because that's what I wanted to do, is why I went into teaching. And it's like, but you get the kids, I don't want to do it, and I'm like, but why not? Like, come on, like get active. And I did circuit training the other day, and I put star jumps. I was like, I'll start off really easy, like 30-second exercises. We're doing star jumps. Oh, my shoulders, oh, my legs. And I was like, guys, come on. Like it's physical activity, guys. And we just gotta get on. And I think obviously I've got 100% different barriers to overcome with SEN. But yeah, it's finding, I think for teachers, we do have to find those own little satisfactions and those little mental rewards, because there is no physical rewards for us really.
No, of course, and it's great to see those outcomes for those kids, especially when they pass GCSEs. And working in SEN can be so much more difficult than having a class of 10 of SEN compared to a class of 30 mainstream is
Yeah.
so much more challenging within itself. So rewarding in its own sense, but when there's so many different needs, and you might have things such as global delay or autism, etc. You're getting those results is a huge achievement.
Yeah.
And it sometimes can be argued a bigger achievement than another teacher getting those 30 mainstream kids because so much time, effort, thought, care goes into those kids. And it's not saying that the other teacher doesn't, but you have to put so much more effort into these SEN kids because they need that more support, they need those more resources, and it can take its toll on you both mentally and physically because you are preparing and you are in early, you are in late, and all those hours to add up throughout the year. And suddenly then you add in karate, you add in coaching, you add in family, you add in partner, you add in running a house, and everything else that comes with it just before you even start listing what you do as a teacher. Um, but it's incredible that you work with the SEN kids, and that they're quite lucky to have someone like you who's active and knows when to take P lessons and can engage them and make them quite active, and just having that balance which can really help them. But that discipline and routine can really help an SEN child as well.
Yeah. And yeah, like we do have such a rigid structure. Like the other day I forgot to tell my tutor group we had an assembly, and they were just like, what? And I was like, I'm so sorry guys, it's my fault, I didn't put it on the board. Like, because visually, if they can't see it and they don't know it's coming, it's complete meltdowns. And yeah, and I think obviously, like, seeing this place as well that I'm in now, the school I'm at, it's so different, and you can see that the kids do not get physically active outside of school. It's probably only a couple of kids. Like, even I've got one kid, he plays cricket, but I just sit and I just look at him and go, yeah, but you're still quite lazy. Like, you're not. If I go, right, come on, we're going to the woods today, we're going to go for a walk, and it's like, oh, do we have to? And I think obviously with SEN, I think the parents, I understand. Well, obviously being around SEN all the time, I can sympathise with how parents feel, and it must be so hard to think, right, what do I need to do to be able to take my child out and be physically active with them? And we know there's not as many opportunities for SEN kids to be involved in sports outside the school, and they'll struggle. Like, I couldn't imagine any of my school kids come into my football coaching because it would just they wouldn't be able to cope with the scenario and the amount of kids. But then it's SEN is so specialist, I think, that it does require like specialist people and also people that are willing to give them that time, because those SEN kids, they will be very talented, some of them, but they're also not going to be able to take on as much as the sort of our mainstream kids.
It's understanding those kids as well so much more, and having the
Yeah,
right people in place for them, the same as coaching. Having the wrong parent can really change the environment or even dynamics amongst the team and those relationships. But in SEN, having the right person that they can rely and depend on is so important. But sometimes in SEN, just because they have a disability or an additional need, or SEN, doesn't exempt them from having rules,
yeah,
boundaries, or discipline. And I know I was speaking to one parent, they're like, "Oh, my child suffers with anxiety." Yeah, and why are they exempt from discipline? How I don't.
yeah,
That doesn't justify it for me. I understand it. I've been in it for 6 years. I've worked with multiple kids. I've worked with high ends of autism to low ends,
yeah,
GLD. The list goes on. But they still get disciplined. They still have outcomes. They're
yeah,
not exempt from it. And anxiety, I get it, but anxiety, if anything, discipline should help them more to
yeah,
understand and cope with that. Sometimes I get that they might get more anxious, or, oh, I don't do this, and then I get disciplined. Well, maybe that's going to help them with timekeeping, with management, with keeping on top, with routine, and then discipline of, right, oh, if I've done that in a job, my boss is going to discipline me, or, my performance, etc. And it's the same when they approach school, same when they approach sports. It's that correlation of everything that needs to be in place to benefit them as a person to their needs, and creating those long-term benefits as well.
and yeah, and I think that's almost like why probably adults now have probably got less anxiety, because I know for a fact, I like growing up, if I ever didn't want to do something, it was get on with it, or if I felt worried about something, it was like just go and do it. Like it was, and you just had to do it. I think growing up, whereas working with kids, they're like, oh, I don't want to go into that room to do my exam. I want to go in my own room, and it's like, oh, okay, they're anxious. And I'm like, yeah, but they're not, you're letting them have that. So they've learned that. They've learned, oh, if I tell you I'm worried, we don't have to do it, or we can do it differently. We can do it on their terms. Whereas, because I think, and also social media has such an impact on kids these days, that it's almost normal to have anxiety. It's normal to be anxious. And I'm actually like, no, because if I was ever worried about something, I was basically kicked out the door and told to get my ass to it and move on. Like it wasn't, there was never a, oh, hold on, let me be softy, softy and touchy feely with you and all lovely dovely. It was just do it. And I think that's why we are a lot more resilient probably than younger people today, and which is probably why I'm quite a tough nut. Like I'm a quite a tough parent. My kids literally have to be on death's door if they want a day off school and things like that. My attitude is, if the school ring me, then you're unwell, but actually go to school. Um, and yeah, I just a firm believer in resilience. And yeah, with the routines, my own kids are much better behaved. Um, if there's routine, like today has been hell. Because there's nothing on telly for them, and I'm not no disrespect to the Queen at all, like, but they couldn't go out anywhere. We couldn't go and do something. It was just a walk to the local park, and that was it. And it was just so hard today because there was no routine, there was no structure. They should have been at school. I should have been at work, and it was like, what are we gonna do? And it was hard. And then the behaviour just goes through the roof. Then I shout at them, and it's just like, I can't do this now. I'm done with you lot. Like, go to bed. Like,
And sometimes that routine can hamper in different ways, and suddenly you find free time and things are shut, and it's like, what do you do? But I'm sorry that you have had a hard day, but I'm sure that the usual disciplines and everything else kicks in everywhere. So little things like that can sort of creep through, which is fine. But it's it's 8:30 on a Monday night before school. It's been from a long weekend, but it just shows your character, and how great it is that you've come on and wanted to do this podcast and be on this episode and speak about everything. And as I said at the start, everyone's lives that you're in are very lucky to have you involved, and it's great to have your skill set and apply yourself to so many different areas. But it has been great to speak to you. I've really enjoyed every minute with you, and I'm gutted that it's 8:30 on a Monday night. But as said, whenever your schedule allows, it'd be great to get you on as many times as you want to. But I am so thankful that you've come on and, as said, enjoyed every second. But I wish you best of luck in school with the rest of the kids after 3 whole days with your own, and that everything goes well this week. But again, thank you from me.
Yeah, no, brilliant. No, I've enjoyed it. It's been a quick hour, I must say. I just sort of looked, I was like, it is actually 8:30. But no, yeah, it's been good, and I've never done something like this before. But I think it's good to talk to people in different areas as well. Sometimes, like karate can be quite isolating, and that is my main thing. So to talk about different things as well, it's good. And yeah, like again, whenever it allows and whenever you need it, I'm happy to do it again. Thank you.
No worries, thank you, and that's brilliant, and I can't wait to see you again. But have a great week, and see you
You
soon.
too. Yep. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.